All right. Back again with Ben to talk about l'étourdit. This time focusing on the second half, or what's called the second turn. Second turn, yeah.
Yeah.
The second turn, where we had our first episode talking more about Lacan generally, the second episode talking about the first turn of l'étourdit, and then this one, the second turn. So that's the focus. But before we get into that, this will be found on Podbean as well, which you can find a link for it in the description below. And also my Patreon is there for anyone interested in that. If not, I set up some pretty funny goals that are worth checking out, at least if you're up for a giggle. Ben laughed. Have you seen them?
No, I haven't.
They're funny. It's like one of them is like, I'm going to produce an album.
Can I get my name in it?
Yeah, sure.
A song dedicated to me?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. But yeah. All right. Well, now, Ben, for those that haven't listened to the other ones,
Okay.
what do you do?
So I'm a fourth year PhD student at the Center for Theory and Criticism at the University of Western Ontario. And I'm writing my dissertation on Lacanian psychoanalysis and philosophy, basically.
Yeah. Sounds... I still know nothing about psychoanalysis. Like,
You know enough.
yeah, but like, let's be real. Like, psychoanalysis is something for me that I don't know. It seems like every time I read it, I am more thrown off. Not because I disagree, but because I have trouble. Like, okay, this is my problem.
Okay.
I don't know what the psychoanalyst is supposed to do.
Sure.
Which this is all like setting up what the second turn is going to talk about.
Yeah.
But I mean more generally, when we think of even of like Freud, what is the psychoanalyst supposed to do?
Yeah. So we're talking about psychoanalytic practice, and not where's it? Well, yeah. So I mean, psychoanalysis is like very much a form of like psychotherapy, like to treat mental disturbances, and like it works through talk therapy. And I mean, you'll often hear non-psychoanalytically inclined people say things like, oh yeah, like we might use psychoanalytic theory, but like there's like Freud's theories have been debunked or whatever, like we don't practice psychoanalysis, but like we very much do. They're like Lacanian schools in like Toronto, in New York, in California.
Oh, wow, really?
And like there's like very prominent in Europe, in France, of course.
Fair enough, yeah.
And in Latin America.
Really?
Yeah.
How do they differ, like Lacanian schools from like a Freudian one, if you know? Like,
well, I would think that like the Lacanian schools focus more on language. Sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And linguistic interpretation, Lacanian psychoanalysis also functions like through like the timing of like the analyst intervention in ways that like Freudian, more traditional Freudian analysis might not. So like there's early in Lacan's career, like he got kicked out of one of the first schools, the first international associations, for what was called the short session.
Okay.
Where the idea is basically, instead of like sitting with your analyst for an hour and talking, and like you have an hour every time, the Lacanian analyst cuts you off. They choose when to cut you off.
Oh, okay.
So like, and the point is to like, it's ending the session before you can say more. So that...
deliberately?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because like when you get to over-explain yourself, you do get a sort of like satisfaction out of that.
Oh.
And enjoyment. You can kind of explain things away.
Yeah.
And so the point like of analysis, Lacanian analysis, is to leave you frustrated.
Oh. Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, analysis isn't fun.
Yeah.
And I should say that like I haven't been analyzed, which, depending who you are, may like totally disqualify everything I have to say. But like, I think especially in the North American context, that doesn't matter so much.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, it's harder to find someone to get analyzed, and I don't think anymore that that's kind of the only proof that there is of like that there is psychoanalysis.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, there's obviously no denying that it's there.
Yeah.
That it operates.
So, like, to come back to your question, what's supposed to happen in an analysis is like it's supposed to produce like a subjective change in you. So, like, you come to analysis. Like, because, like, something's going wrong with, like, your thoughts or your actions, you have psychical symptoms. And so, like, you work through your symptoms and fantasies with the talk therapy. And then the big question that Lacan kind of touches on here and his predecessors do is the end of analysis.
Right, yeah.
Which is, Freud wrote I think an essay called Analysis Terminable or Interminable.
Okay.
So the idea is, do you just like talk forever and like alleviate symptoms that come up, like an interminable analysis, or like, is there a specific like subjective change that analysis can produce?
Okay.
That like marks the end. So
that would, if I understand that right, that would imply that there's almost a roadmap with a destination in mind. Like, It's not just looking for difference qua difference. It's looking for a certain kind of change or a certain kind of difference.
Yeah. So like, can analysis produce a kind of subjectivity that would not be possible without analysis?
Right. Okay.
So like, can it?
Yeah.
Because it's, instead of just alleviating psychic symptoms, which I should say, like, we can only do for neurotic and perverse subjects, not psychotic subjects.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just, analysis works differently for them, which is its own question. But so can analysis take a neurotic subject and produce, like, change their subjective structure, basically.
Yeah.
Produce, like, an analyzed subject or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair. I mean...
that's important to know you want to know whether or not your analyst, what kind of subjective structure they have, too. And do you need to undergo this kind of change to become an analyst?
Oh, I see.
Big question.
So, okay.
And that hinges on whether or not there is an end to an analysis, too.
So the analyst is supposed to embody actually, I'm going to phrase this like a question. Should the analyst embody the change that they want the person being analyzed to arrive at?
Yeah. Well, I'm probably not.
No, okay.
But the idea is, like, do analysts need a certain subjective structure? Or
right.
You need, does analysis have to have a different aim for analysts? Because you can't become a certified psychoanalyst without being fully analyzed and being authorized. And in Lacanian schools, they have a procedure called the pass, which is we're not going to go into, but it's basically a verification procedure to, like, decide whether or not you've been, whether or not you should be an analyst. Yeah.
And part of that process, not to go into it too much, but is you having already had been analyzed?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess so. And you have to, like, decide to undergo it, and you recount your analysis to, I think, 2 people, and then they recount it to a panel.
And then that panel
And so
decides.
and that way it's functioning, like your analysis is functioning through the big other too.
Oh, so all that is deliberate.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Lacan like comes up with this procedure deliberately.
Because that process is supposed to embody or supposed to engender what he understands to be the big other, that is, society.
Well,
at
the
large.
idea is that like whether or not an analysis has happened, like doesn't depend on the subject who's undergone it saying, yeah, I've been analyzed or whatever. It should be transmissible
Right.
without that subject.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, but so whether or not there's an end to analysis and what an analyst needs to look like are related but not like identical, because not everyone that finishes analysis becomes an analyst.
Right, and not every analyst is the same.
Yeah, and you should ideally, like, people that go to school to be analysts should potentially come out of it not wanting to. Like, I think Lacan and like Miller say like it's weird that like people would be psychoanalyzed and then want to like be an analyst.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it's not fun.
Yeah. Well,
And you treat your analyst like shit in parts of it. Like, you fall in love with them, you like hate them,
Right.
and
I just think of a number of other examples in society at large, like the military.
Mm-hmm.
I have no reason or no understanding of why someone would join that.
Yeah. But I mean, especially not after you've been to war and then you join the military.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for sure.
like, if you do something like that, you can only join because you don't know better. But like here, the analyst should know better.
Everyone should know better because they went through it.
But so then the Lacanian question is like, what is the analyst's desire? Like, what mode of desiring is appropriate for an analyst?
So who's learning in the analytic process? Like, is it the
Is there learning in
analyst?
the analytic process?
Is it the analyst learning about themselves?
Well, no, it's the analysis. So we talk about in the analytic situation, there's the analyst and the analysand.
Yeah.
Instead of the analyst and the patient, because really it's the analysand who does most of the work.
Yeah.
Like, you interpret your own symptoms and everything. You do all the speaking, you recall your dreams. And really, you only project a kind of knowledge onto the analyst.
Right.
They really don't know,
Yeah.
like, what's in your unconscious or anything like that.
Yeah. Why would they?
Yeah. And so it's also not clear how much of like an in-depth knowledge of like Lacanian theory you really need to function as an analyst too. Like, is it all just everything you need to know comes straight from the clinic, or like do you need theoretical knowledge?
Yeah.
And that's like, these are big debates.
Yeah, cue up this text we're going to talk about. Like, I don't know the kind of applicability you can find in something like this, but
yeah. I mean, I would say the theoretical knowledge helps you. It helps you think things through, at least. And I think you do find a sort of conservatism in analysts or anyone else who sticks like solely to like practice.
Yeah.
Is where you get all your knowledge from.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Like, I don't know. And I don't know if Lacan at all meant to do this, but I find myself being challenged in ways I never thought possible in reading his words.
Sure.
And I don't know if he does that, with intent, but, I can't help but feel like he has a way of, I don't know, projecting his own kind of method into his theoretical work. So in that way, I see some kind of possible validity to, analysts actually having, a foundation with that stuff. But, I mean, I don't know about this stuff.
Well, I mean, this is like, that makes me think of like one of the questions that interests me a lot about Lacan, and is like how he uses his own like theoretical insights to like produce his own work. So like, because like as you might know, he has like a few essays like this that you create. Most of his work comes from like 27 years of seminars.
Yeah.
Which is spoken.
Yeah.
And only gets like recorded, and like other people have decided we're gonna like write this down.
Yeah.
So like how do his insights inform the way that his writings function? 'Cause like this very much does not read like a normal essay.
No, it does not. No, it's not an essay. It feels like a series of aphorisms of stream of consciousness.
It's it seems to me almost like it's own standalone kind of like artifact.
Yeah.
That's like it's not like I think it would be wrong to talk about like what is like to read this and talk about what does Lacan think. Like sure, Lacan wrote this, but it is its own like functioning piece of writing. It's meant to like produce these imprint these ideas and like record them, and they produce like specific effects. Like when I read this and like he's talking about topology and all these different figures, it's like I have some idea of like how these relate to the seminars or whatever, but like you still have to like you probably come at it with your own ideas, and you it functions by like creating these associations.
Yeah.
Like you have to work with it.
Yeah.
And the first section of like part 2 is like the topology of surfaces, and he takes you from like the torus to like the Mobius strip, the Klein bottle, the cross cap.
Yeah. And what are those? What is the torus?
But it's like you have to like imagine these like different figures. You have to work through it in your mind, or like physically.
But you work through it in your mind based off the description he gives you?
Well, you have to like know what they are already.
Know what they are?
What these figures mean.
Yeah. So how I understand a torus is like a ring.
Yeah, basically like a hula hoop.
Like a hula hoop, yeah. Mobius strip is like how do you describe a Mobius strip? It's like a ribbon that...
Yeah, like a ribbon but with a twist in it.
Yeah.
But only one.
And that meets back to itself, forming a circle. A closed circle.
Yeah.
But...
So...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a two-dimensional figure with a single twist. And if you travel all the way around, like on one side, travel the whole surface, you'll end up at the same position on the same part around the circle.
On the inverse, yeah. Okay.
And the Klein bottle is a weird...
Yeah, what is that one?
I just had to like Google this like before coming here. It's so a Mobius strip is like, or I guess a torus is like a 3-dimensional figure.
Yeah.
A Mobius strip is 2-dimensional figure.
Uh-huh.
Put like displayed in 3 dimensions, so it has the 2 sides.
Yeah.
And a Klein bottle is 1-dimensional.
Right.
So I guess like we should say like the important thing to know about like mathematical topology is that like what matters are like the changes in space. And, like
I'm looking it up.
Yeah.
What matters with the changes in space?
Not like so it's spatial, but it has nothing to do with like distance or like any of the things we normally associate with it. It's like changes and cuts, and that's what.
So the bottle is like
yes.
It's like what is that? Like a black hole or something?
It's almost like a tube, but it circles back around, so the outside becomes the inside.
Right. So imagine like a beer bottle. Now imagine the tip of that beer bottle extending out and then swirling back around to enter the bottom of the side of the beer bottle, so that there's like a closed loop where nothing can escape the beer bottle as far as the liquid goes, but it appears as though stuff can go into it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
If you have the chance, Google it, because it's a strange
it's a
figure.
bizarre image. So you could think of like an empty cylinder.
Yeah.
Like a hollow cylinder that like circles back around to the bottom. So like a torus is basically a cylinder made into a circle.
Right.
And so Klein bottle is sort of like an impossible figure, but the bottom circles back around and becomes the top.
Right.
But it's one-dimensional. There's only one side, too.
Yeah.
To the whole thing, too. And that's...
Yeah. Okay, fine. Why does that matter?
Yeah.
Well, why is he talking about
what
this?
do these have to do with analysis?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question.
So let me say that this is what I think, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So he describes a transition from the torus, so that's the ring, to the Mobius strip, which we described as like a ribbon that's twisted, so that, How he describes that transition involves something very specific, and what that thing is a cut.
Yeah.
A cut that, if I understand it correctly, is needed if you took the torus and I could be screwing this up because I'm thinking about this happening in either two ways. You take the torus that is the ring and you cut it on its edge. That way you've severed the ring. Now if you, in a very literal way, twist that ring and put it back together, then you'll form a Mobius strip.
Yes.
However, Lacan doesn't... He says, yes, in that process we see the Mobius strip form, but he says we should always be mindful of the fact that the Mobius strip is not in and of itself Mobius strip. It is product of that cut, and because of that, the cut is what marks it as the Mobius strip. That's what I got from that.
Yeah, you only through like this procedure operating on the torus.
Yeah.
This small twist gives you the Mobius strip.
Yes.
And then, I think we should just work through
if you got
these like movements. So how do we get do you remember how we get from the Mobius strip to the Klein bottle?
Yeah, all right. The Klein bottle. The Klein bottle.
Okay.
What do we got? Did you find it?
So the whole point is like we have a sphere and then it's a spherical shape that you twist and turn to the Mobius strip. And he just is describing the transition from a Mobius strip to the Klein bottle as something about putting a hole in the Mobius strip.
Right.
So you're turning a disc. It's turning a disc into a hole.
Yes.
Okay.
That
circles back around on itself.
Because that is exactly what the Klein bottle is.
Yeah.
It is something that comes back. Okay. Whereas the Mobius strip comes back to itself from one point back to another point, the Klein bottle bends its own figure to arrive into itself. It doesn't attach to itself. It goes into itself in a way that makes it look as though it's even more dimensional. It has more dimensions to it, but it in fact does not. Right?
Yeah.
It's regressing while giving us something of a depth that is only produced by more cuts. Almost.
Yeah. It's sort of by creating a hole. So whereas the Mobius strip, you simply cut the ring and twisted it, here we're creating a hole.
Right.
And circling it back around. And then you really do have to look at these images. They're impossible images. And are just it's not... We are describing them poorly. But we couldn't describe them in such a way that you could not listen to them.
Yeah.
And then the cross cap.
Right.
Is sort of. I mean, I don't even know. Can we?
Yeah, cross cap. Yeah.
So yeah, the cross cap. The cut that we perform another cut after the Klein bottle, and there's basically like one of the sides flips, and the two sides meet each other, but are distinguished by the cut. They're split.
Yeah.
And form the same sort of spherical space.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's because it's topology. It's not really a sphere because what matters is like that. There's the cut. Yeah. So then, like, why are we talking about these figures?
I mean, I don't. Here. I will. If you can humor me, this is what I understood from it. Because I was asking myself that, why does it matter?
Yeah.
Why do these cuts matter? Why is he talking about these surfaces? Well, to me, he's describing successive phases, and each of these phases coming about via a certain cut. Yes. What I also interpret as being a kind of the infliction of some kind of intervention. And in a sense, I see that as being, and could be way off base, but like the psychoanalytic process is that act of, I have two possible answers, either the act of recognizing the cuts and being able to tell a person, over time, or get the person to tell themselves, or it is the act of inflicting the cuts to promote that. Now, I don't know which it is, if it's both.
It's both.
Okay.
Probably. I mean, like when we ask, like, what does the psychoanalyst do? Aside, like, beyond, like, attempting to give interpretations or whatever, like, there's Lacan's trying to think of, like, these, like, structural points where the psychoanalytic act has to occur. So
are those the cut points?
Yeah.
Right.
Where the psychoanalyst can intervene in the subject's discourse of their own discussions of their own personal history and their symptoms, where the psychoanalyst can intervene to produce a subjective change.
Yeah.
Instead of letting them like explain it away or whatever else.
Yeah.
So by putting these topological figures first, where basically Lacan, I would think, is trying to like lay out the structure that we have to think, and then that gets filled in like the practice of psychoanalysis.
Right.
So he says later, like structure, like topology is structure.
Yes.
Like full stop.
Yes. Yes.
And so this is like marks a change from sort of Levi-Strauss and like the structuralist before, where structure was kind of a differential combinatory, like we have basic, like elementary structures, elementary points that change. Here we're talking about the structure of subjectivity, and it's these kinds of shifts in subjective space that define the structure that he wants to talk about, instead of, whereas like when we were talking about like the logical necessity and sexual difference last time, this kind of structure is purely in the symbolic.
The structure that we find here with topology is in the symbolic.
No, this introduces the real.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas when the structure of purely logical necessity, of the differential combinatory, of structure and play, are purely symbolic.
Right.
So what these figures allow us to think is, like, basically is psychical space. That...
Yeah, say more about that.
Yeah. So... So, psychical space is like basically like this space that Kant describes in the transcendental aesthetic.
Which one is it? Space or is it time?
I mean, when you read the transcendental aesthetic, it's really weird.
Yeah, no, it's
it's really weird that time is the form of inner sense.
Yeah.
Like space being the form of outer sense makes sense.
Yeah.
But why? Like, it just seems like okay, we have inner sense, we have time.
Yeah.
And like we need to do something with both of them.
No, but we should add, he ascribes it to the soul. That's important.
Well, yeah.
But yeah,
just
to throw that in
That's
there.
true. He wants to save. Kant wants to save faith at the expense of reason.
Yeah.
And it's admirable.
Yeah.
But so we're talking about space. Like, first off, Kant. Well, we're talking about space, like the space that's defined by language, and language as like the material medium of thought.
Yes.
And like it's worth noting that like mathematics or like Kant wouldn't have had any non-Euclidean conception of space.
Yeah, sure.
Like mathematics was limited to like arithmetic, algebra, and geometry until like 100, 150 years ago. So he would have like thought of cyclical space in terms of like a very like a flat plane.
Yeah.
You couldn't think of this kind of space that twists.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so so when we're talking about like the subject that enters into an analysis, this kind of flat space is the torus.
Right.
Your kind of like average everyday subjectivity.
Okay. All right. So that's why he starts there.
Yeah. And so the point of the torus is not only that it's like modifiable into the Mobius strip.
Yeah.
Which it is. But it's modifiable because its center of gravity is elsewhere.
Like it doesn't belong to itself. It's in that.
Well, it's a ring, but every point that it like takes up spatially, it occupies like out of like pure necessity. So it's only a ring because it circles around and because it's equidistant from an empty point.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
So the ring is the space of subjectivity.
Okay.
And it's defined and articulated around a center of gravity that's elsewhere.
Yes.
And so Lacan calls this space not the dimension of space, but the dimension, dimension.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of these little.
This isn't like.
So dimension in French is dit, which is speak.
Yeah.
Like speak mention.
So it's like a dimension defined by like language.
Yes, that makes sense.
So the space is defined by language. It's psychic space that only has like an existence in so far as it's like spoken or like.
But how it's constituted from the outside. It does not have its own. Its center of gravity does not come from itself. But as soon as we talk about this in terms of language, as I'm getting, is that we've automatically deferred the thing from itself, and I'm just using that term just for simplicity's sake. And now it, whatever constitutes it, be it, in this case language, is that thing that exists outside of it.
Yeah.
So is this why? As an aside, is this why Derrida didn't understand Lacan, or why Derrida just stole from Lacan?
I mean, we're not even going to talk about Derrida and Lacan. Well, I mean, first off, like Derrida and Lacan were talking about language. Much earlier than this essay was written.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, Lacan straight up told Derrida, like, oh, you've just been saying the same thing as me in my seminar. But also, like, Derrida comes onto the scene in 1968. Like,
yeah.
And Lacan's been holding, like, 15 plus years of seminars.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, anyways.
Lacan might be right about Derrida, too. He could have been nicer about it, but...
Anyway. So, all right, these surfaces, right? So we have...
we have subjective space is defined, like, linguistically. It's articulated linguistically around the object of desire. But so we're relying heavily on the subject-object distinction here, right?
Sure.
So one of the things, like, I think in a lot of ways, like, we've forgotten what this distinction means too. So, like, we think of, like, subjectivity and the subject is like, oh, it's like the thinking thing that I think. Like, think about Descartes and like, we think about Sartre. Really.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether or not we know it. And Lacan wants to preserve the subject. And, like, people attending seminars are always like, why do you talk about the subject? Like, couldn't you just not talk about the subject?
Yeah.
But the point is, like, subjectivity is what, like, emerges in the world as different in kind from, like, the world of objects, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so does that give then certain credence to what we were discussing earlier, in that we have to recognize that, from analyst to analyst, there are going to be great discrepancies that maybe I will say quite vulgarly we can attribute that to this narrative of subjectivity. And what is more, the person being analyzed has to be recognized in their own terms.
Yeah, they have to be recognized in their singularity.
Sure, yeah.
And that's, like, the defining... That's what analysis is really trying to get at, is the singularity of each subject.
Okay, yeah. So I have another question, but I hope it might be a quick one. Is it a coincidence that he describes 4 different shapes or 4 different surfaces, topological surfaces, and is it a coincidence that there are also 4 different discourses?
Ooh.
I don't know. That's thought experiment.
I mean, maybe.
I don't know.
And there are 4, like, formulas of sexuation.
Yeah, that's right.
You
like number 4?
Well, I mean, there are 4... I mean, I think the correct answer would be the, like, 4 is appearing out of necessity.
Yeah.
I know in Zizek, I mean... basically demonstrates that, like, the 4 formula of sexuation do follow the logic of, like, the discourses, the 4 discourses.
Yeah.
He has, I've seen it, it's like the unified theory of, like, the 4 discourses and the formula of sexuation.
Yeah.
But, like, it would make sense that, like, the discourses which form social bonds do follow by necessity the logic of sexuation.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's an aside.
I mean,
anyways.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Like, the answer is, like, yes, structurally that there would be 4 points is probably
deliberate.
Not a coincidence. Not a deliberate, but necessary.
So what do they have to do then with the real? Like, where does the real come in? Because to just kind of reiterate, so what we talk, it's wires, probably ruining your day. The real, as we kind of talked about last time, is an impossibility.
Yeah.
The real is that which cannot happen. Can I say that? The real is that which is...
No, because the point of the real is that it does happen.
But I thought it was like
it's the impossible.
The non-sexual relationship, which is an impossibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an impossibility that happens anyway. That can happen anyway.
Right. Okay.
So it's an impossibility.
We're talking about love, or
not just that, like, it's you put it out of the picture. Like, the Kantian, like, thing in itself is an impossibility in that it's simply excluded.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas the Lacanian real is like distinct from like the thing itself and the noumena because it produces effects in psychic space, and it does so by way of like the logical necessity that the formula sexuation lay out. And so that's why we can talk about psychical space topologically in terms of the torus, the Mobius strip, the Klein bottle, and the crosscap.
Yeah, yeah.
It is like these it is because the real intervenes in psychic space and in the symbolic.
Yeah.
And is different from meaning, from reality, from this sort of like coherent space that you find Kant insisting on. Because
I mean,
the real produces these effects in psychic space as an impossibility. So like these are all impossible figures, right?
Yes. Okay.
So like that's what we mean when we're talking about impossibility.
Mm-hmm.
That the impossibility produces the figure. It produces the structure of psychic space.
Yes. Okay.
It's not so.
Yet it is still representable. Is it representable?
As impossibility.
Right.
So as like logical necessity.
Right. Like how these shapes for us are, we can simulate them on a computer, but we don't actually have, any recourse to. We can't point to them out in nature.
Yeah. I mean, you can, but they would not look anything like our figures, too.
No. There's kind of perfection behind them.
Yeah, when they're elaborated, they're almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
The impossibility is like structural.
Right.
And the work of analysis is to find in the subject these like structural points of the real.
Okay. What you might not have the answer, but what do those look like?
Yeah. They look like the phallic function in like. So I don't have an answer, and I think it is like unique to each like singular subject.
Yeah.
But they look, and it is like the subject in its singularity as. So later on, Lacan will formulate the concept of the synthome, and like the subject as like a symptom itself.
Yeah.
Instead of like the kind of pathological symptom that would bring you to analysis.
Yeah.
Whereas like symptoms produce distortions in psychic space, in the unconscious, but also enjoyment, like you enjoy your symptoms.
Okay.
You are also yourself a symptom.
Yeah.
And that's one of the more like radical implications of like Lacanian psychoanalysis. Is like I mentioned the distinction between subjectivity and like objectivity. The subject-object distinction is like as like speaking beings, we are like literally like symptomatic like points in like reality as such, in the universe, in whatever.
Damn.
So like the subject emerges and is produced as like enjoying speaking being.
Yeah.
And like this combination, basically the combination of like sex and language in like an organic being distinguishes us from like, or makes us a unique kind of creature that like is like capable of like these great like civilizational like achievements that we have, like art and culture,
The big other.
war and whatever, and like is capable of tripping itself up, is subject to like death drive.
Right.
And like neurosis and psychosis.
So it is from that combination, language, sexuality.
Yeah, language and sex.
That we see the emergence of anything at all.
No, we see the emergence of the unique kinds of beings that we are.
Okay.
So like, there's in a lot of contemporary theory, you'll find like these accusations of like anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like you're putting people at humans in like a privileged point. And so we're kind of doing that. But it's not the fact that we're humans. Like, it's not that like God created humans are special.
Yeah.
It's that speaking beings are unique kinds of beings. And distinct from like the animals who don't speak. And that's not to devalue like your cat still has like moral worth. Like it would be like wrong to destroy your cat in the way that it wouldn't be to like smash this cup on the ground, right?
Yeah.
But that like there's still like a fundamental difference.
What do you think about that cat?
It's like fucking adorable. I was petting it before we started.
Yeah, and okay, that's fair. And I can
so like we want to make that we want to like preserve that distinction.
Yeah.
And it's language that distinguishes us.
Yeah.
But it like allows us to like elaborate our social lives and our psychic lives.
So is the task then to kind of firstly to recognize that we're always going to arrive at some kind of impasse because we are both blessed and cursed with this thing called language.
Yeah.
And it is by virtue of that then our only recourse is to try to drive towards the best of all worlds with this, demon we have strapped to our backs. So that's it. Like it's about navigating this problem that we all mutually share.
Yeah, I mean basically.
Okay.
It's that language. Like once we're subject to language, we're subject to the unconscious, and
right.
we're inserted into language as much as like we speak language.
Yeah.
And it colonizes us. It articulates our bodies, our social lives, our unconscious. And the point, like, you could almost say that the point beyond, like, relieving psychical pain and suffering, the point of Lacanian psychoanalysis is to learn to enjoy by way of language, to enjoy being a speaking being.
Okay.
So it's not just that like it has these effects on you, on your desire and your thoughts that you don't know about that form the unconscious, but that it also makes like a specific kind of enjoyment possible. It makes like intellectual enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Or like, yeah. And so the point then is you also get to articulate it in your singularity by way of language without knowing it.
Yeah.
And you need to uncover how like your own enjoyment has been articulated without you knowing it. And you have to learn how to work with that.
Yeah. So, okay, fine. Do you think that moves us into the second chapter?
I mean, to be honest, I don't...
Or if you don't have anything more to say.
I don't know if this, like the second half... The first half you could sort of read through diachronically. We have basically like meaning and sense, and then formulas of sexuation, then absence. Yeah. And here, like we start out with the with the topology. Yeah. And it's basically re-articulating that in different registers.
Right. No, that's true.
So it's almost, I think would say you almost have to talk about it in like a different way.
I mean, okay. however you want to do it.
But we could go on to the next section.
I'm open for anything. If you're like, if you want to represent this in that way, I mean, let's do it.
It's
because I would.
I mean, I don't think there's any, like, especially after reading this text, I was trying to think, like, well, like, what is this? Like, what happened? Right? Like, I mean, do you have an answer?
Like, yeah.
I mean, like, you literally, like,
I don't know because like there was a point, like I felt like I got it for like the first 10 pages. I was like, I was with it. I got the topology. I thought I got the topology. Chapter 2, it talks about like the role of the analyst, which we've already pretty much talked about.
Yeah.
And then it goes into like this weird section. Yeah, about page 10.
Yeah, when it's structure.
It lost me. I was gone. It messed me up.
Same.
But
that's about where I stopped highlighting.
But that's the thing. Like, okay, so here's like, why does it need to be so difficult? Like, but like, why? Why does it have to not make sense? Because like, I don't even know how I could understand it. Like, if I, and I don't know if it's just because I haven't read enough Lacan, but like, if I was Googling, like, I don't even know what to Google. Like, I understand the words. The words aren't, I know what the words mean, but like, I don't know what he's saying.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah. I mean,
and like why? Like, why?
That's kind of like the first thing that I think should be like a consolation to anybody that tries to read Lacan's his writings, is that, I mean, he said he doesn't write to be understood.
Yeah, fair enough, but like...
But so, like, if you don't understand it, if you're confused, you're like... It's not because you're missing something. It's not because you don't know enough. If you... like, the second you think you've understood one of these texts, like, it's basically become useless, and, like, there's nothing more you can do with it, right?
Yeah. But, okay, and this would be the test for me, because... There's part of me is like, dude, I feel like you were just, I don't know what was going on. You were just writing this stuff out as it was coming to you. You didn't read it over. You weren't like trying to worry if it made sense. And I would forgive that if like I could sit down with him and he would, and you already kind of suggested that he wouldn't do this, but like if I could get an answer out of him as to what he was doing here, and then like a week later he'd give me the same answer, then I'd be like, okay, there's something here. Yeah. And I want to know what that thing is. But, like, I'm reading it, and I'm like, I don't know what the thing is. I don't know what words he's using. Or I don't know how he's getting at the thing that I don't know what he's getting at. And I don't even know if he's, like, himself is sure that he knows what he's doing in this process.
Sure.
So are you confident that he is, like, or was, like, absolutely... down with what he did here and was like, yeah, that was the only way I could explain this thing?
Well, I mean, like, he does say that this is like a synthesis of his, like, basically of like his thought up to this point, what his conception of analysis.
And what year was this again? 2010. Jesus.
Yeah, 2010.
So in the 70s?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what year, but it's written during Seminar 19 or worse, published during Seminar 20.
Right.
Encore. And or worse has like just been translated into English like last year. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of just registering this late part of his thought, and like or worse is by far the hardest seminar I've read. Harder.
This isn't a seminar, but like harder than this.
I mean, it's on par with this.
So
this is almost. This doesn't read like a regular essay where he's making an argument, where he's describing something like some phenomena.
Yeah.
Or like laying out a train of thought, but it is like highly edited and precise.
Sure.
And like one part of the struggle of like reading it. reading our translation is like it's translated like literally.
Yes.
Because the translator, well, because like the French is written so in such a strange manner and so precise.
Yeah.
And like they didn't know what to make of it.
I wonder if I can bring it up here. Keep talking and I'll try to yeah, they didn't know what to make of it. But
that like because it's not making any kind of standard argument or like
it seems to be all over the place. Like there's no like
the way I think of it is like it's a linguistic tool to be like, or it's a tool to be used. Like it's supposed to, that's articulated linguistically. Like you're not, we could sit down and try and parse it word for word, line by line, or whatever.
Yeah.
And you would spend the rest of your life doing that, and you wouldn't really get anywhere. But it does lay down the formulas of accentuation in writing for the first time.
This is the first time in his career we see that.
No, he works on them in his seminars.
Right.
He spends 3 years working them out. The seminars 18, 19, and finalizes them in 20 after this. But they're published here, I believe, for the first time. But yeah, it's the way I read it is as something you have to do something with.
Yeah. And I don't know what that thing is. And I was trying to find the real version here, the French version, because I checked it out another time and we talked about this off speaker or off microphone. And the translation is really is word for word the translation. But the translation isn't it isn't bad. It's just not good. If I could say it that way. There are things that can't be translated. There's the dimension thing, the speak mention that you can't translate that. And there's another one that's après-midi, which would be afternoon, but the play is après-midi, after I've said, or after I've told myself, I guess to some extent, that he plays with the afternoon thing, and I don't know why, but he does. So there are certain things that can't be translated, but as for the general language, I feel it might just be difficult to translate Lacan. I don't know, because I haven't translated it. But if you just do it word for word, the magic is going to be gone. Because one of the specific things that I pick out, and that the translator would shy away from, and it's really difficult, is that in French you can have a pronoun le or la, which is pretty much it in English.
Yeah.
So what often happens in French is that you could be reading a sentence and the subject that the le or the la corresponds to, you can easily pick out, because if you know the gender of the thing, you can know when they say they make reference to it later because they use le and not la. And they're talking about that thing. Whereas in the translation, they would just say it. And in English, we don't have that. So we're at least there were moments when I'm I don't know if you're talking about, you mentioned a few things here. I don't know which one you're talking about. Whereas French has a way to kind of get around that.
It's much more, you can almost hold more in a sentence.
You can hold more in a sentence. And that's why French has longer sentences. Just generally the French language, they use longer sentences.
And I mean, honestly, I think English speakers should not be shy away from using the same word more than once in a sentence. For this exact reason.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it does, it allows a kind of, displacement and, ease of speaking.
Yeah.
And it makes the meaning more, the meaning, appears in your mind almost more easily. And I think what we're working with here with this essay is very much a linguistic thing that's has an existence. The point is to create, I would think, is to create something that has a kind of existence that doesn't necessarily need to refer to like, or without like reference to its meaning.
Yeah.
That like it continues to produce effects.
Yeah.
Meaning effects, of course, linguistic effects, but something transmissible that's not limited to some like interpretation or some like to what Lacan really meant or like some phenomena that it's referring to. Yeah. It is the phenomena that it's referring to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is like it's referring to like structural like necessities, logical, topological necessities.
Yeah.
And like but it's not so much like trying to tell you what they are, but like displaying them for you.
Yeah, but that's interesting, right? Because he like feels the need to sketch them in some way or other.
Yeah.
Where
he has to lay them down in writing.
Yeah. And even to like kind of locate them within these four figures of the, you know, the ring or the torus ring or the torus, the Mobius strip, and all, you know, all the rest. It seems to be like, to me, I was wondering, like, what is the point of even doing that? If we want to talk about like a, I guess, unstable kind of subject, or one that kind of arrives via certain cuts.
Yeah.
I don't know why he needs to almost give it these literal images that I find, like, for my own part, and this is me just trying to get into the Lacanian mind frame, like, would seem to restrict, you know, what then subjectivity could mean. Because then it's like, oh, I know, you're in this phase, or I know, you're here. Which, maybe that's what they want to do, because that's part of the project. Yeah. But, like, yeah, I don't know. If you have anything to say to that.
Okay. So, yeah, the question is it to talk about like subjective structure in terms of like these kind of like basically to talk about in terms of like these structural points. I would say no, it's not more restrictive. Like we think about people like to talk about these like proliferation of difference, of infinite difference or whatever.
Yeah.
We think that anything goes, like whatever. There's more, but really the like this is like an old point from structuralism. So that it's only within limits, like defined limits and rules, that like we find infinite proliferation.
Yeah.
So like
yeah, okay,
there's subjective difference. Like each of us is like singular because we're articulated within these very precise like logical like rules. We like our articulation follows like logical necessity.
Yes.
Like
yes. So do you hate Deleuze?
No, I mean I think Deleuze knows this.
Okay.
And Derrida knows this. Like when we talk about like Derrida's essay Structure and Play. Like we often think about like play is somehow opposed to structure, right? And that's like fundamentally not true. Mm-hmm. So think about any like a board game.
Yeah.
Playing the game is only possible because you have set rules. So like if we take a deck of cards and we don't have any rules for what we're going to do with them.
Yeah.
Like okay, what next?
We'll look at them.
Yeah. Like we'll throw them around or whatever. Like
but that we might have wicked fun doing.
Yeah. But you can only do like one or two things and they're all like kind of stupid. Right? But once we started playing making up rules, like like something to do with like higher and lower cards, like now you can start doing things, and now like you get you can have like an infinite variety of like the game, like the infinite instantiations. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So there's always, so what we're concerned with, like, in psychoanalysis is, like, the singular instantiations of subjectivity.
Within these rules.
Yeah. And so, like, and the rules of, like, logical necessity, not, like, cultural norms, or things like that, which follow the same kind of rules of subjectivity as subjectivity, which is why, like, Lacanian psychoanalysis has been so, like, usefully, I guess, applied outside of the clinic.
Yeah.
So it follows the same rules. But it's like there's infinite singular subjects possible with, like, one rule or 4.
Yeah.
So, but there's greater, like, variety.
Sure.
When there's only, like, a few logical formulas that the elaboration of subjectivity follows. There's 2. That's the point of formulas of sexuation. 2 contradictions that, and they're by which you, like, fail to form a full subject.
So what sense can we make of, like, the rules changing?
Mm-hmm.
Or can I say the rules are synonymous with the big other?
Well, the big other establishes, like, cultural norms, establishes things within the rules. But
Things
it's
within the
about,
rules.
like, how you respond to the fact of the big other.
Yes.
So, like, does the big other, is it separate? Is it the big other, like, does desire align, like, one-to-one with the big other, or is the big other in some way opposed to the law, like, lay down the law of desire as something separate?
Yeah.
So, like, these 3, those are basically the modalities of, like, psychosis, perversion, and neurosis.
Okay. Yeah. It all works.
Yeah. And there's only 3, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, what the big other is and says is elaborated, like, within these structures.
Right.
But
so my question would have been then, or still is, how do we make sense of changes of the rules? Where does that, from whence do the changes come?
Okay, yeah. I guess you could almost say either, like, there are changes within the structure where you, like, within, like, you change what, like, occupies key structural points or something like that, like, and then we're talking about, like, in staying in the 4 discourses, what is, like, the like, defining, what's the word, what's, like, the organizing principle
In Lacan?
of, like, for a subject or for a social formation.
The organizing principle.
Yeah, so you can talk about changing the organizing principle.
Are you still looking for another word?
No.
Oh, okay.
The organizing principle.
Yeah,
So the master signifier in Lacan.
Yeah.
Or, like, so if you want to talk about changes in the big other, you can talk about changing the organizing principle of the big other, or changing your relation to the big other. So, and then we're talking about a shift from the all to the not all.
Christ.
I mean, that's, like, the thing. Is, like, you feel like a lot of people, like, feel trapped. Like, you read Lacan or listen to Lacanians talking, it's like you feel trapped in every point.
Yeah.
But also, like, you're stuck in these impossibilities. There's no way out. Like, it doesn't sound good. Like, I don't know why. Like we live under, like, the horrors of, like, capitalism and colonialism, and, like, we live in, like, a horrible social world. I don't know why you'd think we would have good things to say.
Yeah.
Like, why our diagnosis would be anything other than, like, what follows from like the way our social world is elaborated is
Yeah.
like that you're fucked.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. But so like the point is like that it's still like nothing good follows of necessity from these social structures, right? From
Yeah.
capitalism, from colonialism. But that doesn't mean that nothing outside of these structures can't emerge.
That's interesting to me because
Yeah. Nothing like within capitalism will ever produce like of necessity another like mode of production. But with the laws of capital defined, we can think of like the laws of another kind of mode of production or something like that.
yes.
And that's
So
moving
it
it beyond
it
what's
comes
going.
from the inside, yet does not.
Well, by like thinking of how this is sort of all, these structures are sort of all encompassing.
Right.
Like our social world and subjectivity, our like own innermost subjectivity.
Yeah.
You can't like, it's naive to think that like this is going to lead you to emancipation.
Yeah.
But it like makes it possible to think of something else. Maybe. Like something with like these structures defined. If it's possible that there's something else.
Like outside of it,
Another structure.
another structure.
There's no outside.
Yeah.
That's why Lacanian, like the diagnosis of Lacanian psychoanalysis, feels so claustrophobic.
Right. Yeah.
And like, oh, it's all encompassing. Oh, you're kind of being dogmatic. Like, first off, like, any other, like, your other, yeah, people, other schools of, like, contemporary thought, like Deleuzianism or whatever, are, like, much more, like, dogmatic and less creative, I would think. And like,
Shots fired.
yeah, for real. And like are not nearly as capable of dealing with social phenomena in their complexity and in their contradictions.
Yeah.
And make diagnoses like, oh, we need new possibilities of difference.
Yeah.
Or like whatever. That sound like utopian, or like we need to erase like the human, or
Sure.
but like we want to like no, we want to preserve like what we are is like speaking beings, and like we
Yes.
follow these like our lives and social world follow these like rules that like lead to what we the conditions we live in, not arbitrarily,
Yes.
and don't lead out. And there's no like metaphysical deep structure
right.
that's going to take us out. It's going to be like the
Well, just in the
contingent
way that
emergence of the real.
In the way that you phrase that, to imply that a deep structure will take you out of structure just implies that
It's
you
like
know,
nonsense.
salvation by the thing that you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. You're bringing, like, cashing theology back in.
Yeah.
Like, that there's some structure underlying, like, capitalism.
Yeah.
Is, like, is something you find in almost every other school of thought. Like, whether it's, like, Deleuzians talking about the rhizome, like, Zizek and Badiou, like, wonderfully make the point that, like, the rhizome is contemporary capitalism. Full
Yes.
stop. Or, like, other figures like Esposito talking about, like, immunitary paradigm, like, these deep structures that have to, in one way or another, lead to, like, our contemporary social formations. And as a good Marxist, like, I'm going to insist that's defined by capitalism, by
Yeah.
the economic mode of production.
Sure.
You're couching some, like, theological principle in, like, something about, like, the kind of, like, creatures that we are, or something, like, leads to capitalism, or something about, like, something from without, like, is making us act this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the kind of Lacanian explanation is that, like, like, it doesn't matter so much what underlies this. There is no, but that this is like a self-reproducing structure.
Mm-hmm.
And like I guess I would say that like Lacanian psychoanalysis provides us the tools to think of this as functioning on its own.
Right.
And through subjects.
Yeah.
So it's not imposed on subjects from the outside, but it functions through them, they reproduce it.
Yeah.
And impose it on themselves and each other.
Yeah.
Through the unconscious.
Yeah.
Because like if you want to talk about like how structures work, like you have to talk about why we keep reproducing them. And like how are you going to explain that?
Yeah, without appealing to some kind of, or without admitting to some extent that there is something about structure that we simply can't avoid.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that like, yeah. But, and that it's like we're doing it.
Yes.
I mean, I think like...
But, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, we can only imagine that language arrived on the scene at some point.
Yeah.
And for the Lacanian, that point was the point that structure was born.
Yeah, sure.
And with that, the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we avoid a kind of regressing to a kind of romantic vision of, well, let's just get rid of the language? You know, is there a way for humans to go back to that point? And I'm not saying anyone actually espouses this, but
they do.
But do they?
I mean, unintentionally.
Okay, well,
or like inadvertently, but like you do, and you see very sophisticated like espousals of this coming from like whether like posthumanists talking about like, oh, like we need to organize ourselves like on the basis of like cellular like structures.
See, because to me that would seem like a mistake.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because it's an impossibility, or it's a possibility, but it's a possibility that could only be arrived to by like pretty messed up means.
Yeah, like, for sure. It often leads to a sort of like these sort of like fascist solutions.
Yes. Okay, so all that to say, like in the Lacanian paradigm, I see the possibility for the same kind of thing that you're challenging or that you fear. So yeah, and you kind of already
I mean,
why
well, no, buy it. And like it is, I think, important to recognize that like we don't, or like to take up the kind of stances that I am, is to like kind of refuse this question of origins, like what's the origin of language?
Yeah,
like where does it all come from?
Sure.
And it's almost like it doesn't matter, like. So, like, Freud has this myth of, like, the primal father that we've talked about. This isn't, he says it almost as if it's a thing that's happened. And, like, some people have read it as if, like, yeah, Freud thinks this really happened. But it's more that it's a kind of structural necessity.
Yes.
That's created retroactively.
Yeah.
So, like Lacan, we haven't spoken about it, but one of the big points of like emphasizing language for psychoanalytic practice is that it introduces the retroactive action.
Yeah.
So signifiers produce meaning retroactively. Like the meaning of a sentence only appears at the very end. And likewise, like the origins of like our social formations of language only appear once they're fully formed, right?
Yes.
So if you want to talk about going back to some, like, explicitly or not, if we're thinking about going back to some, like, pre-linguistic mode of being, or, like, pre-capitalist social formation, going back to, like, primitive accumulation, these are all fantasies.
Yeah.
That are produced precisely by what you're trying to escape.
For what end?
For its own reproduction. So they're fantasies of the conditions that had to be possible for it to emerge. for it to emerge like naturally. When in reality, so like to return back to capitalism, like the myth of primal accumulation is that like there were some people that saved up money.
Yeah.
And like then like capitalism formed through like
Yeah.
saving and gumption. Well, like no, it formed through like the like Pan-African slave trade and like warfare and like all these like violent contingent acts.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't appear on the scene naturally, but it creates these images of that like of what would have made it possible to appear.
Yeah.
Yeah. To cover over its contingent appearance.
Yeah.
It's impossibility in what came before.
Yeah, and if I can put it in other words, like it kind of whitewashes, you kind of suggesting this, but like it kind of whitewashes its history, because if it can frame the narrative in such a way, and even in the way that I described, like the coming into language as being just a single moment that does, a pretty big harm when it comes to actually, tracing, the genealogy of this development. Very much can be said about capitalism in the way that you said it, where it's a lot easier to kind of think back to a time when it didn't exist, because that you hop across the pond there, you forget about all the shit that made it possible in the first place, and then you can posit this kind of wonderful thing, thereby, perhaps inadvertently perpetuating it, because you are erasing its history, and if you erase its violent history, you're able to affirm it in ways that it couldn't do itself. It appreciates. So
you're
at least that's how
according to its like own logic too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, and so like then this like psychoanalytic point that Lacan's trying to make with this essay is that like, or to tie it back into this essay, is that like this own logic of like necessity and contingency, these coordinates are also found in subjectivity, right? So like, I don't know if we've talked about it, but like when we're talking about the logical formulas, like first off, Lacan like revises the Aristotelian configuration by talking about in terms of writing. So we have like, but so here, he talks about, introduces it into language and time, but so we have necessity and possibility on the one side, where like things keep going the way they are. Yeah. And if you're a speaking being, that's usually not very well, right?
Yeah.
Or like it's accidentally going well.
Yeah.
But so when you want to produce structural change, it has to you have to negate necessity and possibility.
Right.
So the opposite of necessity, or the negation of necessity, is impossibility.
Yes.
And the negation of possibility is contingency. And so that flips Aristotelian kind of everyday understandings. The negation of possibility is impossibility. Yeah. But no, the impossible has to appear contingently to like avert the path of necessity, you could say, to do something that's outside of the conditions of possibility. And that's where the analytic act happens, where the cuts he's talking about, the structural cuts, appear.
Oh, a nice full circle. I like it.
Yeah.
Nice. You got anything else?
Bring it back to our claustrophobic Lacanian paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
What else is there?
I mean, probably lots. I don't know. Nothing. I feel like we've done.
Lacan's
like,
done
a good job.
We've done Lacan.
Like, I mean, maybe I just don't know, but like, I don't know if there are really any like English language like commentaries on this text either. There's like one that's been like translated by the same translator that did this.
Okay.
It's like 250 pages.
Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that one,
Which
and
is, like,
I looked it
helpful.
up, and it. I skimmed that to get a better sense of what was going on here.
But otherwise, like, I've seen like some of the people coming out of the Slovenian school.
Yeah.
Who are great. Like, they inform my thought a lot. Like, then they inform like the philosophical take on Lacan, of things I've been talking about, like reality and whatever. Like, they've started talking about this text, talk about like the ontological implications of psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
But like just like very brief mentions.
Yeah.
Like things that I've like picked up on. Like
it might be funny when someone's like, trying to look up stuff on Google for this, and they're like, I give up, I can't find anything, and then they click like the videos, and there's this series of 3
they'll find me saying things that like I may or may not want to like endorse in a week. But I mean, I would endorse most of what I said this time.
Yeah. Well, last time you have some doubts.
Well, yeah, it's because I listened to last time.
Oh, it's the worst.
No,
like I often have to re-listen to my things because I have to my own stuff. I don't really edit them, but like sometimes if I have like a long pause, I go through and I like cut it out, and I often end up hearing my own voice, which is the worst.
Yeah,
which is the worst.
I don't know if I ever heard myself speak
it's
at
terrible.
length before this.
It's awful. I hate my voice.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Your voice is fine.
Yeah, and your voice is fine.
Thank
you see
you.
how that works?
Yeah.
Like, we all think everyone else's voice is fine, but like when you hear
I think it's that we all think our own voices are shit.
Deep down, somewhere. Maybe not so deep down.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is like one of the few like original English language commentaries on this text, and like you're like I can't believe that you let me do this.
Why wouldn't I?
This is like a ridiculously like hard text.
Yeah, well that
like we're gonna sit down and talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Why not? No, it's tight.
I can't say that I gave much here, but like
you did. You made it possible.
I made it possible. I provided the microphone.
You provided me questions. Like if I sat down and did this on my own, I'd be like,
yeah, what do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that people stumble upon this and actually find it useful. I'm sure they will. But with every like subsequent episode, like the numbers dwindle. Like, people are like, oh my god, like how are we gonna make it through this? But yeah, I don't know. You got anything else?
No. I think we made good use of this text.
Beat it to death. But like this is one we could if
we
we
beat
did
ourselves
go
to death.
Like if this was a text we went line by line through or like section by section, you're very right. Like it's something you could do. Perhaps it's not the best way to read it, but it would take so long.
Oh yeah.
Holy Christ.
Yeah, like I think the like large commentary I was talking about, or that I mentioned, on it. I think the introduction. I don't remember the author, but he's like, yeah, I did like 6-year seminar on Lacan's writings, and like this is the one that stuck out is like, we don't know, like I don't know what to say with it, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And it's like Lacan's writings are like hard.
Yeah, they're hard.
They're all like purposefully.
Yeah.
And like this sticks out as like, it's like resists commentary and like
for sure.
But I think we did a good job picking out like a few lines and like a few points,
because that's like all we could do. That's all we could do, because like if it like no one would want to hear like it's funny because like almost the only way to actually talk about it would be to just read it. Because like that's what it would ultimately come down to. Read a section, read a paragraph, and like, oh, this is what I think this is about.
Yeah.
But it will always just come back to, well, this is what we have. This is the best we're doing with what we have.
It's like, this is what it said. Yeah, I think we both like mentioned like not on the recording, they like try to take notes on this text. You just
yeah.
I gave up. You just end up writing down what he says word for word.
Yeah, well, when there's like a single line that I'm like, okay, I think I get it. I ended up writing it down, but then I found like there were lots of lines I got, but then when I actually tried to piece them together, not the lines with the other lines, but like in their context, I was like, I actually don't know what this means.
Yeah.
So like, what is the point of taking notes? And I take rigorous notes on like pretty much anything I read, and this one was forget it.
And that's, I think, like one of the things with like Lacan, like that I find is like the best like way to get into like Lacan is to read other people. Like,
sure, yeah.
You'll find there are a couple good texts by like Bruce Fink or John Kopchak who like this is like we talk about the symbolic, imaginary, real. We talk about the different stages, or like lay things out schematically. You'll never find that in Lacan.
Yeah.
Like it took like someone else to like start laying out what he was saying in the seminar schematically. And he's like, oh, maybe there is a system here.
Yeah.
But like, so when I'm reading him directly, like you do want to be like faithful to what he's saying, but it's like you're not going to get at like the phenomena that Lacan's describing through his texts. Like it's like when people ask me like, I want to know like what Lacan says about the symbolic, imaginary, real.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but that's like you can go read 27 years worth of seminars. But like you can take his essays and like say something about it. You take notes with Lacan. What's fruitful is like to pick up on the things that like not both that you can like accurately like get at what he's saying, because he is describing like real phenomena, but you can do something with. Yeah. It's like, not just like what is like the architectonic, but like where can I go with it? What can I do with it? What is it? How can I think with it? And that's what we've done, I think.
That's what you've done. I've been along for the ride.
You prompted me to do it. A few key interventions just got me to ramble for like 30.
Here are the little prompts I provided. Hope this helped.
So you made the few cuts necessary for an analyst without even knowing it.
Great. Well, on that note, for anyone that listened this far, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for having me, Dave. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for coming. We'll have to do another one.
Yeah, maybe we can read Something Easy by Freud. Like
I've done the group analysis and the ego group analysis, group psychology, and the analysis of the ego, and I didn't do it justice, because as soon as I was finished, I was like, something didn't feel right, and then I went through like the text again in my notes, and I'm like, I could have been more faithful.
I mean, I read that in like a reading group a couple summers ago with a couple good friends. It felt the same. It's like when you talk about like the kinds of groups he's talking about, or like about like the police and like the school or whatever. It's like you feel like you're not getting at. It's because he's not getting at like really the phenomena that he's describing. Like he talks about like group formation and like the formation of the ego. It's about identification.
Yes, and that's something I missed.
Yeah,
I was reading.
That's something that you're going to miss until you like read it, like basically until you see like Lacan's. Like he picks up like
that's what I did wrong.
People always say you have to read Freud before Lacan, but like I think you have to read Lacan before you can read Freud.
It's a bold statement. Oh, hi. There's a cat here now.
And I mean, Lacan would deny that too,
okay. But yeah, he was the only one to read Freud. Well, anyone who made it this far, rock and roll. Ben will be back on again, I'm sure. And shout out to the people who pay me to do this, Liam, Nicholas, and Salai. Thank you very much for keeping such things alive. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Peace out.